gentlemen, to Free Thought Radio Milwaukee. This is the Mythicist Milwaukee Show, brought to you every Saturday at 7 o'clock here at www.riverwestradio.com. With me as always in the storefront, Brian Edwards. What's up, Brian?
Hey, excited to be here.
Also joining us, Sean Frasek and Adam Bagansky on the panel. Tonight we have a special guest. He is a YouTube personality with over 2,100 subscribers, 79,000 Facebook likes. I have like 7. Can't even imagine. He's John Gleason, the Godless engineer. You there, John?
Yep, I'm here. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
I'm glad to be talking to you guys.
All right. Sounds like you're a little loud here. I'm going to turn you down here. You got a noticeable southern drawl, my friend. You're you hearken from Alabama, I read.
Yes, North Alabama.
Oh, okay. You must be one of the good ones then. You're from the you're from the north. They call you a rebel.
Yeah.
When you go to South Alabama, they call you a Yankee, or what? What's the?
No. I mean, generally when I go down south, I do feel a little out of place. But I mostly feel out of place in general, like in my area.
Yeah, I bet you do. I was going to ask, why is it that all our guests are from the Bible Belt, extreme South? It's like, I can't get a hold of an atheist from Minnesota for anything. What's it like in Alabama to try to do what you do down there, my friend?
It's not too bad, as long as I don't really speak my mind on anything, like in person. I used to do that a good bit, like at work and whatnot. And I mean, I would be cordial, like I would be nice, but it would always end up with the Christians screaming at me. I think the last time I got screamed at, it was over the homosexual ban lift on the Boy Scouts. So, and the guy ended up screaming at me that he didn't want any homosexuals in his Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at him cross, and then I walked away.
And of course, he knows that there's probably 10% of the Boy Scouts are gay, just like the rest of the population, right? What's behind the name Godless Engineer? Are you an engineer? Is that your profession? You make money doing that, or you just tell me about the handle?
Yeah, I started my page right after. It was right after I graduated with my master's in software engineering, and my wife had already created a page, and I was like, well, I've got some stuff to say too. So I created my own page, and it just kind of grew from there. I am an engineer. Like I said, I have a master's in software engineering, and I have a bachelor's in computer engineering. And I do have a full-time job that's centered around that, and I like it very much. I just do like the YouTube and the Facebook stuff, in downtime or, whatnot at home. It started to consume a little bit more time here lately, but, I'm really enjoying it.
That's good. So you're confirming to us that you don't, in fact, drive trains?
No.
Okay, good. Just making sure.
There's lots of kinds of engineers. Now, were you brought up an atheist, or did you come to it later in life? Or
I came to it later in life. I started off as a Catholic. I was, I grew up in a private Catholic school. I went there till I was just after 4th grade, and then I started public school. And after that, we just, we were really churchless for a while. Like, we didn't really go to church. We stopped being Catholic, and we switched to another religion or denomination of Christianity. And just from there, I mean, down here in the South, it's just kind of like common knowledge that God exists, and everybody's a Christian. Like for somebody else to be like not a Christian is a little weird, at least where I grew up at. So I didn't really know that atheism or not believing was even a choice, really, because I had people that were constantly, telling me that God existed, and this is just kind of a duh thing.
So what brought you to what made you see the light, so to speak?
And I wanted to also like ask, when you flip denominations, I mean, this isn't the same thing as like switching laundry detergent, right? I mean, did that surprise you at all? Did that give you any doubts?
Well, no, not really, because, I mean, at least down here, as far as flipping denominations or switching them, as far as a kid goes, just kind of blindly following your parents, it really is like choosing a different laundry detergent. I mean, because it's just the same stuff, except, you know, they have a little bit different rules, and I still have to go to church on Sundays. So it really just seemed like all the same to me.
Well, it sounds like your parents were kind of lapsed Catholics who just sort of floated into a local church where they settled. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. I know my mom, she kind of fell out of going to church and whatnot, although she still considered herself a Christian. I actually, when I was, you know, in high school and whatnot, it was one of those spurts where I was really trying to be a good Christian boy. And I was trying to go to church and everything and be part of a church group. Because, I mean, down here, you know, if you're not part of some kind of church or a church group or something like that, you're really on the fringe of everything. Like you don't, you know, all your friends are going to be going to a church, and so you've got that pressure on you. And then, you know, got just a lot of other pressures, like peer pressure that goes on that makes you want to join just so that you can be part of you know, I guess, society down here.
That's a pretty common phenomenon across the country. I don't think that's necessarily unique to the South. In the North, we kind of had that thing where church is it's a social event too. In small towns, you're kind of expected that you belong to one of them or another, or if you're a weirdo, maybe you were Jewish and you went to a couple towns over, or a Catholic. Quite honestly, where I grew up, you know, you had to travel to a Catholic church. It was, you know, you were Baptist or a Methodist, or, you know, that's what you were. But I know what he's saying. You know, you kind of needed to pick one, or you were a fringe guy. So. That's going on in spades in the South still. I know. What made you quit God, man? What brought you to atheism finally?
Well, it was actually a no true Scotsman fallacy that a friend dealt me one night. He basically told me that you know, if you're going to be Christian, then you got to consider the Bible to be the inerrant Word of God. And right then and there, I was just like, well, I can't say that, so I guess I'm not Christian. So as far as me, like not being Christian anymore, it was like a light switch, just me immediately turning it off. But actually coming into my atheism and being able to admit it, especially publicly, that I was an atheist, it took a lot longer, because I'm the type of person that really just wants to, I guess, be right. Not necessarily about the existence of God, but just like, if I'm going to take up this new position, I want to be informed about it. And, you know, be able to kind of, I guess, engage people with my views, you know, pretty solid, but still being able for them to be changed, you know, with new information. And, you know, with me being an engineer and a very scientifically minded person, I felt pretty capable of doing that. But to get back onto the point, you know, I gradually came into it, and as I started looking at more of the natural explanations, or the scientific explanations for everything that I had been taught growing up, you know, it just sort of like was this receding line of where God really had any kind of relevancy in my life, I guess. And so it just got to the point where I was like, well, you know, I can't say that there's a God. And so, you know, I had to be like, well, you know, I guess I'm atheist. And, you know, at first it was very unnerving, I guess, because being in the South and being a Christian pretty much all of my life, you know, for me to be like, oh yeah, well, you know, I don't think that there's a God. I mean, it's almost like insulting one of the major universities down here during playoff season.
Yeah, roll damn Tide. I know.
Hey, War Eagle.
Yeah, that's generally the chant that goes on around fall down here.
But you're North Bama. You're not an Auburn fan?
Well, it's actually still divided up here because you get a lot of people that went to the different universities, and then you also have the people that didn't go to college at all, but yet they still they still root for one team or another because their parents did or something like that.
Right. There's no pro team, when you're in Alabama and states like that. College football is just so huge.
It is, and that's why I feel like switching your denominations to me is like would be like switching your allegiance from Bama to Auburn. Like it's just not done. But apparently no, that you're saying it's just the Christianity is what you got to hang on to.
Yeah, but I get what he's saying is his parents weren't like bastions at the Catholic Church in town, and then they up and switched to they kind of lapsed out of Catholicism, and then just kind of joined one of these local Yahoo churches down there where. Where everyone thinks that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God, like you said, and that brings me to my next question, John. Is there we have a scale, of course, of Christianity, and our real fight is against fundamentalists and extremism and creationists, quite frankly. Are there different churches down there that compete with each other in terms of the philosophy, or is everyone a damn fundamentalist and a creationist, or do you get some liberals who are kind of more accepting on the moderate side of things and accept Genesis as a metaphor and an obvious parable?
Well, I haven't really had too many interactions with people that are with a diverse set of people. Like they've either believed that it's the inerrant word, or it's been people that I've went to school with, and they've either compartmentalized it so well that like they can think rationally about everything else, but yet when it comes to their faith, they just totally toss it out the window. And so they build this sort of box in their mind where God is and nothing can touch it. And when I was in school, I really tried not to make too many waves, just because I knew that I was going to have to work with them or be on a team with them or whatnot, and it was very hard at times. But the people that I worked with are one of them was a Catholic. Well, he still is a Catholic, but I don't work on that project anymore. But he was a pretty devout Catholic, and he believed in like a metaphorical Genesis account. But then there are other people there that were full-blown creationists. I think in my engineering field, though, I think I really have came across more people that have taken a more metaphorical use of like Genesis and whatnot, and have kind of foregone a literal interpretation of it. But yet there are still those outliers that still exist that think that it's totally literal. I know that there was a guy on the side of the road with that I actually stopped and talked to for about an hour, who was holding up one of the Jesus signs, and he told me that the Gospels were historical fact. And I really had to stifle my laughter after he said that. Just because I wanted to remain nice about it, but at the same time, it just sounded like a joke.
Well, it just sounds like a guy who hasn't actually read it. That's all it sounds like. Sounds like to me.
He wasn't looking for a ride?
No. He had a truck and everything. He's like, I come down here and I do this all on my own time, and I just preach the word of God. And I'm like, okay. You're standing there with a Jesus sign telling us all to repent or we're going to be going to hell.
He feels like he's doing a service. He should probably just be sticking to selling watermelons out of the back of that truck, man. Something that's somebody can get some good out of, man. A little nutrition at least. So you're saying that you encounter people that are more educated and they tend to have a more liberal view, more moderate view of Christianity, but they're still not able to let go of it. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's just because of the field that I work in, kind of produces more people that will come. They're more likely to compartmentalize that aspect of themselves, and so that's the way that I've been able to rationalize it, at least.
How do you reach those people? We see you make fun of Ken Ham, and you read his book on one of the videos, and it's pretty easy to to poke fun at creationists. How do we get these other people who you know that they're intelligent people? They've passed the bar, they've studied, they have multiple degrees, but they still are able to suspend their disbelief and compartmentalize what they don't want to let go of. How do we reach those people? How do we change those minds?
Well, the tack that I generally use is really dependent upon how they come at me about it. You know, if someone's coming at you and they're being very aggressive or argumentative, and they don't really seem to be open to anything, they're just there to say their piece, whether you're going to listen or not. And you know, most of what they say is either based on hell or some other kind of bad reasoning. But you know, whenever I do get somebody that comes to me and is honestly wanting to have a discussion, I generally just kind of bring up a few key topics that try to get them thinking. Like, there's always the free will aspect that's good to bring up. I had some Mormons come by my house, and they actually came by like 3 times. And one of the times I actually got one of them to admit that he sounded crazy.
Free agency, not free will.
But what I brought up with free will was, you know, I just simply asked him, like, do you think that you could have brought a gun here and shoot me in the face, just cold-blooded? And he was like, yes, I can. And I tried not to freak out because this guy was apparently a psychopath of some sort. But you know, I just sat there and I was like, you don't really look like the kind of person that would do that. And his demeanor really didn't say that to me. So, I mean, me personally, I bring up those kind of topics. When a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses women came by, I brought up, you know, misogyny in the Bible and stuff like that. I guess I tailored my responses to the crowd that I was talking to, of course, and really tried to get them to think about it. Although I don't think that any of them really did think about it, but the Jehovah's Witnesses did come back with backup.
Well, they always do, man. They won't let it go, man. Hey, you're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Podcasting, as always, from the storefront here at 824 East Center Street in beautiful River West, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the home of Free Thought Radio. As mythicists, we're terribly interested in what you think about the Jesus myth theory. Are you an atheist or are you a mythicist? Do you think any of these people actually existed? What's your take on that?
Well, as I really investigate it more, you know, I get the feeling that, you know, all of these stories and whatnot were really just they came about due to a bunch of cultural influences and then a cultural need for a salvation kind of God. And I just don't see any kind of evidence that would suggest that Jesus or his apostles would have existed. At least what I've found is that they have, you know, they've taken from contemporary sources and worked in some factual things so that it makes it harder for people to see past it and give it kind of this facade of history. But when you really get down to the actual, you know, trying to verify whether or not a God existed or not a God, sorry, if Jesus existed or his apostles existed, you really just don't find any good references or any good evidence. And so that's really what I base my worldview on, is what we can actually prove and say is fact. And to me personally, I just can't say that Jesus existing was a fact. So that's I guess it was kind of like a light switch kind of thing for me, of just, you know, being like, well, I can't prove it, so I can't say that he existed.
Right. What do you think the cultural need, like for savior-type gods? You know, if Yahweh is the dictator-type God, why does it morph? What do you think? What's going on culturally that you think may have affected this?
Well, I think that at the time, you know, there were a lot of people living in poverty, and then, you know, of course, after that, the Roman Empire collapsed, and the desperation was pretty, full in the air, and giving people something to really hold on to and hope for, I guess, kind of quelled the masses, kept them sedated, I guess, enough for, rulers to move in and fight over territories and whatnot. So I think the cultural need for it, I would say, would be that, people were obviously getting tired of this vengeful and wrathful God. And so they were like, well, why don't we just come up with our own stuff? And that's kind of where the mystery faiths come in, and as well as Christianity, because of course that started off as a mystery faith itself.
It sounds like you've actually done some research. Has anything surprised you in your research? What's the most interesting thing you've uncovered?
The most interesting thing that I've uncovered is just the amount of stolen information that is used to construct the Bible and its stories, and how these stories actually have, that nugget of truth that all lies have. They got that nugget of truth in there, but it's spun, just so much to where, it's really fooled a lot of people. Crap, I forgot the question.
Just what surprised you about your research, and it was a good answer.
Yeah, it's just the amount of information that's been stolen and is still being propagated as like cold hard facts, and that is what really surprises me.
All right, I was reading in one or listening to one of your podcasts, and you'd mentioned how Augustine of Hippo, who did a lot to defend the Catholic Church, there's many forgeries of letters that he didn't write, that they write in his name to try to connect the pieces, because it wasn't making sense back then in, say, 390 A.D., and then fast forward 1,600 years, it makes even less sense.
Yeah. There was I find it really astonishing that people say that there's such good evidence for Jesus Christ, outside of the Bible, when, people that were closer to the time period of Christ felt the need to forge documents, like multiple things, in order to try to prove it. It just really astounds me that people will like, they'll grab onto the smallest thing, and they'll latch onto it so hard, and it's like they're just waiting. They're waiting to the very last moment to really give it up, and it's just impossible to break that grasp on that little bit.
That makes sense. It makes sense. It's harder to do all the research. I mean, I would suspect most people don't even know who Augustine is necessarily and how much influence he had in the church. It's easier to watch, say, The Passion of the Christ and be like, oh yeah, I see. And just take the leap of faith.
Yeah, I was actually, I really started down this path of the mythicism, when I started reading David Fitzgerald's Nailed, and then it just kind of exploded from there as far as me actually, researching and trying to figure out if he actually did exist. Talking about surprising things, like I didn't think that the Bible had misrepresented Pilate. Like, that had never even crossed my mind, that the Bible had totally misrepresented him. But then David Fitzgerald, he really does construct a really good argument, because he pulls from the contemporary sources that were describing Pilate and his attitude and whatnot, and pretty much just showing how that his character didn't match what the Bible was purporting as his character. And
so
I've done a lot of.
Can you kind of summarize the difference between the real Pilate and the Bible's Pilate?
Oh yeah. Okay, so basically, Pilate was your typical ruthless Roman ruler. He didn't need a reason to kill anybody. He didn't care if he killed somebody and they were innocent. He actually had his guards like dress all Assassin's Creed style and get into a crowd and just start going off and killing protesters, just to silence them, So I mean, he didn't lose any kind of sleep over murdering innocent people, but yet when the Bible comes around and they start, characterizing Pilate, he's purported to be just this really a panty waist is the best way that I can describe it, because I mean he's unsure about whether or not he should do it. He's pacing back and forth between the crowd of his Jewish population and back into his house or whatnot, and trying to decide whether or not to kill this Jew. And when he's never had a problem killing Jews or anybody else in his area. And they've got him washing his hands clean or whatnot. That just doesn't make sense when he's in history as senselessly murdering people. That just really goes against his character. And I mean, I've done a little bit of reading and background into like psychology and behavioral studies, and I mean, like for you to say that, well, the Bible's historical fact, and that's how Pilate really was, but then you also have, like, the reality of Pilate, that just seems like two completely different people. And, so, I mean, what's going to hold up, this story or, reality as we can show it? And, reality is going to win out every single time.
Now, what reason do you think they had to the writers of the New Testament would have had to spin Pilate that way? Is that to blame it on the Jews, or is there something else that I haven't thought of there?
Well, yeah, I think that they really wanted to make the Jews seem like, or at least not necessarily all the Jews, but the elders,
the Pharisees,
yeah. The Pharisees. They wanted to seem like that they were the real perpetrators behind it, because if you have the Romans that are doing it, I mean, what purpose does that really serve? Like, because I don't think it would really fit with the prophecies in the Bible, where the supposed prophecies in the Bible, as far as Jesus and how he was supposed to die and whatnot. So,
well, you don't want to make an enemy of Rome and make them out to be the bad guy in your religion at that time, eh?
Well, yeah.
That's another good productive.
Easy scapegoats, perhaps.
Well, the Romans did it, but only because the Jews made them do it.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what the Bible says, is that he only did it because the Jews were threatening him and whatnot. And I got to say, Pilate, he would have seen that as good enough reason to kill you on the spot. Sure. I mean, he wasn't going to take anything from anybody, especially, the Jews telling him what to do. I just really don't see, somebody that was called back to Rome because he massacred a group of people that were on the way to like a holy place. I don't see that person really needing to be pushed into doing anything.
Right.
And then they made up that whole story about Barabbas and that tradition to release a prisoner.
Yeah,
I was gonna say something because somebody mentioned scapegoat, the fact that Barabbas and Jesus played out the whole that
Yom
one
Kippur.
tradition that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Yom Kippur.
Right, yeah, that the story that there was an annual prisoner release is pretty much fiction.
No, they had a goat that they'd release out into the wilderness and they'd kick it off a cliff, but they personified that and made it into a Barabbas in the story.
Well, like I said, Pilate had no reason to let any prisoner go, and he wouldn't have cared to. Would kill them all.
It doesn't sound like Pilate is in the appeasement business.
No, I would say that he's very against appeasement. He was often characterized as doing exactly the opposite of what people wanted him to do.
Does this represent another level of heresy for you down there in your Alabama stronghold, being a mythicist? Does that add even, or do you just avoid it?
Well, I generally try not to bring up the fact that I think Jesus didn't exist, but every time I do, it really like if you could imagine somebody's mind blowing right there, that's the expression that they give me. It's like my mind has just been blown.
Like a tire?
You don't believe in Jesus?
I don't even believe that he walked the earth. It's just a made-up story. Yeah, it was fighting words.
Yeah.
Oh, you wouldn't imagine. I mean, people get mad over this subject. I've been really surprised by that. Is how mad, and it's not just theists either. It's atheists too. That they will get mad over over whether or not this guy existed, and they'll start slinging a whole bunch of vitriol your way. And it amazes me that people can't have a civil conversation over any of this most of the time.
What's your take on atheists who deny it? I'm not sure what unless they really have some evidence to look at. What?
Yeah, well, I think that they're more or less not wanting to, I guess, be that skeptical. Like they can't really fathom the idea that a whole faith would come up around a lie. But yet they easily denounce Scientology and Mormonism, and those are completely built around lies too.
Or the entire Greek and Roman traditions of myths that we even call mythology today. But yet nobody seems to get mad about calling that mythology, even though there was plenty of people that were staunch believers, millions and millions, years ago.
Oh yeah.
So, in fact, the word atheist, wasn't that first applied to the Christians because they didn't believe in the other gods, only the Jesus God?
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
That's the first historical use of the word.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So we've seen that you've researched David Fitzgerald. Are there any other mythicist authors that you are currently reading or have read? And what are some of the arguments? What are some of the best arguments you think mythicists have?
Let's see. Richard Carrier. I've read him, and then there's also Bart Ehrman. I haven't really read any of his stuff on whether or not Jesus existed. I mean, I do disagree with him, as most mythicists do, of course, or all of them rather. But there's some interesting information that he puts forth, like in his analysis of the Gospel of Judas or something. He has a lot of good information in that I feel is pretty important to, I guess, mythicism. Like just for instance, in the Judas book, he talks about how oral traditions back then, around that time, were really easily changed. Like it was common practice for when you retold a story orally that you would change certain things or aspects about it to fit the audience that you were talking to, and most people back then didn't know how to read, and it was just a handful of people that could. And so, if you wanted some light entertainment on a Friday night, you'd pay somebody to come over and read a book or something. But oral traditions were heavily changed. And I found that particularly interesting, especially how it applies to Lee Strobel, I believe. I watched a documentary that he had, and he was saying that, these people that were memorizing the Bible and everything and told these oral histories were just perfect. They just didn't make mistakes. And it's like, I seriously doubt that. And I was skeptical about what he was saying, and so I decided to look it up.
Yeah. So you're saying you have what is your take on Carrier's thesis?
I think Carrier does a really good job with his proving history. I haven't made it to his actual book about the historicity of Jesus, but the proving history is when I first heard his method for proving historical events or whatnot, yeah, I fell in love immediately just because it just made sense. I don't know how else to explain it because, for those of you that don't know about Richard Carrier and the method that he kind of constructed in his Proving History book, you have to have a lot of corroborating things to say that an event actually happened. He gives the example of Caesar crossing the Rubicon, and you had historians on the Roman side and on the enemy side, and you had coins that were minted, and also the fact that if he didn't cross the Rubicon, then all of these other events wouldn't have happened. So, I mean, it really does come at historical, historicity from a very evidence-based point of view, and that is what you really want to look for as far as, in my opinion, as far as being able to prove the historicity of Jesus or whatnot.
Dr. Carrier, of course, one of 3 featured speakers at the Myth Information Conference that we are hosting here on April 25th, Milwaukee's first ever of its kind secular event. You going to make it up for that, my friend?
I would like to try to make this year, to where I go to a lot more conferences and whatnot. So I didn't know about that. I'm definitely going to do my best to try to get up there.
You put the shea behind an Alabama mule, my friend, and and head up on
gotta represent
up I-57 or whatever damn road.
That's right.
Yeah, just gotta make it up these dirt roads out here, and
So-
I gotta put me on some shoes,
That's
and
what
then
I'm
I'll be
talking
right
about.
up there.
That's what I'm talking about. Spit that tobacco out.
The
And
War of Northern Aggression's over.
run a comb through your hair and hit the road, my friend. But that is in April on the 25th. We're very excited about that. Go ahead, Sean.
I just had another question, John. One of the things what started us and gave us that aha moment was the movie Zeitgeist. Obviously, there's a lot of people that would say good things, bad things. A lot of opinions that surround that film. What are your thoughts on that film? Have you seen it, and do you think it does a good job of explaining the mythicist position?
I haven't actually seen it, so I guess I can't give too good of an answer on this. I have seen a lot of information that spun off from it, and I guess maybe that was a little bit what helped me get started on researching whether or not Jesus existed, because you had these images going around the internet that purported that Jesus was based off of all of these different mythical people, and then there was another counter image that came out saying, "Oh, none of this stuff is true," and so pretty much just through my interactions with people, them telling me that this Zeitgeist movie is wrong most of the time, with a lot of people coming at me like that, I was like, okay, well, I'll look into this myself, and that's where I found David Fitzgerald's book and Richard Carrier, and also I didn't mention Gospel Fictions. That's another one that I'm currently working through. I can't remember the author right now, but yeah, sorry, I didn't see Zeitgeist. I know that a lot of information in it is wrong or is very loose. I guess not very well supported, and so I guess maybe that's the main reason why I haven't seen it, is because there's a lot of opposition to it, and I guess to kind of go outside of that movie and find other sources, seeing what people say, is how I kind of handled that.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee show, brought to you every Sunday at 7 p.m. We bring you secular guests from around the world. And it's time for a segment we like to call Myth or Money, where we give away a little bit of dollars for the answer to a trivia question. Take it away, Brian.
All right. We're at our Myth or Money segment, where the myths may not be real, but the money is, and we want to know. And nobody here shout out the answer. What the actual meaning of Thomas. You know, the Apostle Thomas. What did that word actually mean? Because it doesn't seem to me like it really fits with, you know, many of the names. Caesar, Augustus, everything ends in us and cuss, right? But Thomas, you know, it seems like a very an American name. Where did that come from? And you might be able to find it on the Godless Engineers video about apostles. So check it out. If you can give us that answer before Monday at midnight, we'll send $20 your way to the first winning answer.
All right. Thank you for that. Go, Sean.
John, we in the Mythicism Milwaukee team partners with the secular group in Milwaukee. We feel that the mythicist position, the information that's in that is a good tool in the toolbox of a secular person. What are your thoughts on that? I know you said you had some atheists attacking you with vitriol. Do you see the mythicist position fitting in atheism, or is it kind of standalone, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, me personally, I feel like people who think negatively about being as skeptical, I guess. I don't really think of it as me being too skeptical or as skeptical or whatnot. I just see it as me being skeptical. So I really do think it does, you know, have a place in the atheism movement, I guess, because, I mean, you know, one of the big things about, you know, being an atheist is that you are skeptical, you know, about, you know, the existence of God. You don't believe in a God. So, I mean, you're skeptical about it. And I mean, if you're a good skeptic, and I don't mean to paint everybody with a broad brush or anything like that, but I mean, if you really are a good skeptic, you're not going to accept very, very malformed evidence for something, especially for Jesus. Because, I mean, if you think about it, you know, Jesus is used to validate a whole lot of things in our society today. I mean, you know, there was Leela Alcorn at the end of last year who committed suicide because, you know, of her parents' religion and their religious, you know, bigotry towards her. And so, you know, this idea that Jesus existed is really used in some pretty heinous ways. And I would think that if anything, that's what, you know, I guess that the atheist movement or this growing movement of being skeptical about our religions, you know, I think that that's really something that we should question and talk about. And so I think that it very much so has a place in the atheist movement.
All right. Speaking of some current events, this current Pope, Francis, has seemed to be a little bit more lax on things, talking about how things don't have to be wizardry or magic. But what do you make of his recent comments on that those that insult religion might expect to get punched in the face?
Yeah, I had just pretty much 2 words to say to that, and I don't know if I should really say them on the air, but my son's also a few feet away from me, so I can't say it. But yeah, I heavily don't agree with him about any of that. It seems like I had a lot of opposition when I was first talking about this, but you know, basically he's saying that, you know, you shouldn't insult faith, but if you do, you're probably going to get killed for it.
or expect some kind of retaliation. Certainly, the antithesis of turn the other cheek. Yeah, exactly. And you know, a lot of people don't really understand the ramifications of what the Pope says, because, you know, the Pope is supposed to be like the direct line to God, the direct line to God on earth. So, I mean, what he says is you know, as far as I can remember from my Catholic upbringing, it's supposed to be taken as, like, you know, the Word of God. Infallible, right?
Yeah, infallible and whatnot, and then people come in behind him and have to correct him. I find that pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
It's funny. Apparently, I read into this that there's times that he speaks with infallibility, and then other times, I guess off the cuff.
Depends if he's got the switch turned on.
But we just need somebody to coach us through, and tell us when those times are, and just to set the record straight. But as far as his actual comments go about receiving a punch or retaliation that you should expect when you insult someone's faith, I really think that it's them wanting to keep this pedestal that they've got their faith on. Because, they've got God on this pedestal where he shouldn't be criticized and, he can't be criticized and whatnot. And they want to keep that pedestal because if they can keep that pedestal, then, they can pretty much, I don't want to say do anything that they want, but that's what it kind of seems like. I mean, they always come at us, the atheist community, about, being able to do whatever. But then, how can you really call it ultimate justice? You're able to wipe that slate clean yourself by praying to God and asking for forgiveness.
When the Pope himself comes out and advocates violence, doesn't it point out the need for atheism and the secular movement to bring a voice of reason to a world where one sect routinely makes war on another?
Or at least mitigates, right? Advocate, but just mitigates the badness of this, right? I mean, he's saying, well, you should expect it. But go on.
Yeah, I think that with him coming out and saying that you should expect violence is pretty. I think it really does kind of highlight the need that we have for a secular-based movement. Taking God out of these kind of decisions, because if they had their way, being theists in general, I mean, pretty much across the board, any theist is going to be like, no, you can't disrespect our religion, and so instances like Charlie Hebdo, are wouldn't have happened just because they would have censored anything like that. And so it wouldn't have happened. And to me, that's like killing a roach with a shotgun. You just need a shoe. You don't need a shotgun to kill a roach.
Right.
And they're just looking for this blanket, they're looking for a blanket thing to solve problems or whatnot, and that blanket thing is, don't insult faiths, or our faiths are above criticism or something like that. But then, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but then you get into the whole thing where with the Catholics, they have this rampant pedophilia that goes around, and I don't know if anybody has seen Mea Maxima Culpa, but I mean, God is used in some pretty heinous ways, and it's because of that pedestal that they put him on that they're able to use him like that.
Right, you're not rambling at all. The show is for you. That's why we see the importance of the mythicist position. Atheism, secularism, that only takes you so far. But when you start breaking down the stories and you start to see how these are the same stories that we accepted in antiquity as mythology. These are mythological beings. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, we're stuck in this world where we think this stuff actually happened on Earth, and I think that's what really gives them the fuel to spark these people's insanity in some cases. When you start saying that this is mythology, these are stories that we created that we're talking about, I think that takes a lot of that power away from them to manipulate people and tell them that God told me to do this.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I've always, as the years have gone by since I've had this worldview, I've really come to really notice how religion is used to cover up like mental illness and all of these things. And I've always felt that attacking at least Christianity where it thinks it's the safest, it has been a really good tactic, because I mean, they're not expecting you to come out the gate with, well, Jesus didn't exist. And of course they want proof for it or whatnot. But attacking that core idea that he existed, I think, is going to be like the load-bearing wall that brings down the entire house of it.
Are you really on your own down there, or do you have a support group? Is there a local atheist group? Is there a local mythicist group? Is there a local humanist, secular group in Alabama? Anywhere? Is there any kind of oasis down there? What do you got going?
Yeah, there's one official organized group called North Alabama Free Thought Association, and I haven't really been taking part in a lot of their actual physical activities. Which, like I said, this year I'm hoping to kind of up that participation. But there's multiple local groups on Facebook that I'm a part of, and I kind of lend my help in there as far as being supportive, because I think that's one thing that the atheist community is really lacking is support for our growing group. And a lot of people that I've noticed haven't really been comfortable going to physical meetings or whatnot, and they prefer the online space of reaching out to people where they're behind a computer. And so that's really what I've kind of focused on, and that's really panned out well. I mean, we've been able to help a lot of people in the Godless engineering groups, and I hope that we can continue to do so.
Well, it's great to me to see the internet's been a real boon to atheism because of just what you said. Most people who are the worst, the most oppressed of us have a hard time coming out, even in a group of other atheists. They don't want to be, they want to remain anonymous. And before the internet, it was really tough for folks to find their voice, and people like you who are doing what they do are really have unlocked the key to a lot of broken minds. And the meetups are great, and people do come out, and those that do contribute mightily. But
yeah, speaking of the internet, godlessengineering.com is where you can find him. He's got a number of articles that are really good. Talks about a satirical onion piece, definitely worth a read, and also the YouTube channel.
What's coming up next for you? You got a video in the works? What's your next project?
Yeah, I have stumbled across a street preacher. And I've segmented out his hour-and-a-half long rant into different things, and I'm hoping to do some on that. And plus, I do a logical fallacy series. I had been trying to keep it on Fridays, but I've been finding trouble getting it, finding the time to get it edited and whatnot. So I think I'm pretty much just gonna move that to a more, when I can get them recorded and edited and put up instead of on a specific day. But I do that, and I also do a weekly Did Jesus Exist? And where I examine the arguments, against. Right now, currently, I'm working on, arguing against a literal gospel Jesus. And then, I have it littered throughout in there, my own little bit of commentary about, the arguments that I do get, about them. Like I have half of an episode written where I discuss Occam's razor, because that's usually used against me. It's well, it just makes sense that a guy started it. And so, I investigated that that line of thought, and found it pretty unconvincing. So I have a few things in the works. Of course, I've always got my page online where I make current event images or whatnot, my commentary on those, and then we have our groups and whatnot. So I'm usually a pretty busy guy.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show with us and spending an hour of your time with us. Would you return the favor, perhaps, and let us get on your platform and shout about us?
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely.
We're doing the same thing you are, man. We're lucky to be in the North, but we're in a black hole of secularism ourselves here in Milwaukee, where the people are quite attached to their Catholic churches and so forth. So we're all fighting the good fight. So hopefully we can get on your show too.
Yeah, well, actually, later on tonight, or just after this interview, I'm going on to the Reason podcast that I've been doing with a few friends of mine, and we do that every Sunday night. So definitely, we can communicate over email or whatnot. But I'd love to have you there, or just in a general live stream on my channel.
Beautiful. My people will be in touch, my friend. It's 7:55. Time to cut you loose. We really appreciate you hanging out with us tonight, and we will talk to you soon. He's John Gleason, folks. Take it easy, buddy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye. The Godless Engineer, my friends, on Mythicist Milwaukee show here on riverwestradio.com. Join us next week again for another edition. Thanks, everybody.
Definitely. I wonder if he's going to T-Pain up that preacher he stumbled across. Yeah, it might be fun.
All right. We'll check it out.
Tune.
See you next week. Thanks, everybody.